cover your ears, folks, but America is a declining empire. And you heard it here first. Or if you went to a university. And these guys are actually accelerating that decline because they're so ham-handed. A lot of these institutions they're destroying were designed to both do some good, but also cement U.S. influence. All the international institutions, international financial bodies, NATO to some degree, parts of the UN, Agency for International Development. I mean, AID helped get people clean water and feed them and fight disease, but they also used AID to hide CIA operatives in the Central American wars, or clean up after Iraq, or give, unconscionable amounts of money to Bechtel to screw things up when they were supposed to be building schools and showers that were electrocuting our troops. So they all had a mixed bag, but the Trump people didn't see that part of that was influence. And they've pretty much destroyed most of that.
Welcome back to War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. My guest today is truly the ultimate dream guest for the show. Not only does he have a Wikipedia page, which is how you know he's important, he is also a stand-up comedian. So yes, Bill Hartung is an American political scientist and author. He is a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, where his work focuses on the arms industry and U.S. military budget. And he is also the social chair of the progressive foreign policy community. We just hung out recently at a happy hour in Gowanus, so I can't thank you enough for getting me out of the house.
Well, it's funny because, as you know, there was a table reserved next to us for the Barry Weiss people. And I kept saying, oh, no, there's some old progressive press called that. It's not them. But then 30 of them showed up, so obviously it was them. And I was going to just play dumb and say, free press. What is free speech exactly? But yeah. I didn't have the guts. So finally, we did that little photo at the end, and a couple of us chanted, free Palestine, and they ducked under the tables. So that was about the best we could do. I thought they looked like normal people, but others said no. They said they were too Tony. They shouldn't have been in Brooklyn to begin with. And then we had this progressive radio host who had fought against the gentrification of the neighborhood. She was grumpy for about 3/4 of the night, like, there should be housing here. And you're on top of a toxic dump, don't you? And then at the end she said, I had a good time,
That's how you know it's a good time, when you feel free to kvetch. And it is funny. They're obviously brave to venture across the river, and Mamdani's New York can't be as scary as they're trying to tell us it is if they're hanging out at breweries.
Well, I think also a lot of us had Knicks shirts on, so we looked non-threatening.
Yes. Yeah, the great equalizer for the entire time.
Like the Hamas supporters through Anunnaki is a small group.
Yeah,
so.
I was going to say, though, Comrade Jalen Brunson, I whether it's real or not, I might have seen that he said he's not going to the White House.
Well, Brunson is fascinating because he's big, he's not built like a basketball player. He's playing fullback. And they lean on him the whole time he's got the ball, right? He bowls his way in there. He does those underhand scoops, and he just will not be denied. The guy is unbelievable.
What can the anti-war, anti-military spending community learn from Jalen Brunson?
Don't give up. I mean,
yes.
Nobody thought the Knicks would ever win a championship again. And whenever I go on these interviews, like, Bill, world peace, isn't that kind of impractical? I'm like, the Knicks won, And James Dolan somehow let them assemble a team without screwing it up. They must have drugged him or something. Because normally he would have waited till LeBron was 55 and bought him, and then made him play by himself. That would have been the Knicks.
Yeah, maybe he was too busy with his cover band. Like, he was sufficiently distracted that Leon Rose managed to sneak in and build a winning coalition. And also the Knicks are a testament to wealth redistribution. And in that, like, everyone's talking about how Jalen Brunson took a pay cut so he could assemble his team. So they're when
Yeah,
Mamdani
yeah.
said, yeah,
No,
they
it's all
don't.
cool. And we talked about this because you're a Knicks fan. The difference between those few wonderful days of Linsanity and watching Carmelo Anthony hold the ball for 8 years. Kind of like the two approaches to basketball, you know.
It took a team, and we made it. And yes, speaking of team, you and Ben Freeman, sorry, no D. Um, it's odd. He's on offense, no D. The $1 trillion war machine: how runaway military spending drives America into foreign wars and bankrupts us at home. And it's fantastic. There's a lot of good stuff in the book. But to learn what's in the book, people can read the book. So while I have you, I want to talk about what's happened since the book came out in November, namely like the latest Iran war and whether or not that's changed the
Wait, no,
conversation.
that's all propaganda. Peace has broken out.
Yeah.
We won that war, by the way. We totally killed. I was on with some right wing think tanker on Al Jazeera, and he was putting forward the proposition: we have Iran right where we want them because they're suffering more than we are. I'm like, well, that's always been the case. That doesn't prove anything, and we're bottled up, and they can't sell oil. And I said, you know, it's like maybe you made some small tactical gain. It's sort of like you were number 3 to get pushed off the Titanic. Now you're number 4. I'm not impressed. And he was one of these guys who stays on script, so he just repeated his talking points. And Al Jazeera said, "Gotta come back. That was fun," you know. But these people, I mean, some of them are delusional. Some of them it's a marketing scheme because if force doesn't work, their source of money dries up. But those myths die hard about the well, you know, either America's the savior of the world, or the cowboy on the frontier, or the shining city on the hill, or the country that busts up the world and loses wars and bankrupts itself. And it's under discussion, you know.
Yeah, I launched this podcast a year ago where war is stupid seems like provocative, almost edgy, and now it seems hot.
But see, it's you hit the American audience because you knew war is stupid wasn't enough, so you had a subtitle. So they know,
Exactly.
oh, War is Stupid is an anti-war podcast. Okay, I wouldn't have gotten that because you got to start at a low level for Americans, you know, as evidenced by the fact that they voted for Trump, you know.
In your expertise, what do you think is the most powerful and effective form of American propaganda? The book covers Hollywood, sporting events, straight up lobbying.
Well, gaming caught me by surprise because I'm not a gamer. You know, there's not that many 71-year-old guys doing first-person shooter games, but I would love to meet them. You know, but we did have a very earnest, great intern working for Peace who spent all his spare time doing shooter games. And I wanted him to at least show me what it was. And then I was out in Montana giving a talk, and I couldn't sleep, so I was up at 3 a.m. And the desk clerk made me coffee. And I told him that I was ill-equipped for the parts of the book that Ben did about like Marvel movies and gaming. And so he walked me through all the Marvel movies, all the good games. I'm like, damn it, I should have talked to you before we wrote the book, you know. But, you know, gaming's bigger than Hollywood. I don't know if it instills a will to violence, but it certainly wastes a lot of goddamn time. And I think it does give that illusion, as in the movies, like one person's going to solve it. You know, like, well, the atomic bomb's about to go off, but they've put it on a timer. And if I get there before the timer runs out, I can save the world. But what if they don't do it that way? Then there's no movie, you know. Or even the, you know, the movie, Catherine Bigelow's movie, which was like the
Ooh,
nukes are coming.
House of
And
Dynamite. Yeah.
yes, but the missile defenses aren't working, and this junior guy says, "Yeah, well, you know, they fail half the time in the tests." And this general's like, "We spend $50 billion for something that doesn't work." Like this is news, you know. And but in fact, since Reagan, it was $350 billion. So they didn't have a good fact checker on the movie. But the Peace Movement thought this movie was gonna like put us in the catbird seat, which whatever that is. Some sports guy used to say that. I think it's a good position. And you know, so but some people are like, Well, if it doesn't work, let's spend more on it. You know, we're America. We can make this work. And of course, the tech bros and the women who support them and profit from their activities and do their propaganda, they're all about it's different now. Our tech will create the impermeable shield that Ronald Reagan promised us in 1983. Granted, they've never even done a realistic test. They've blown all this money, but we're tech bros. I mean, look, we put rockets in space, driverless cars. We're going to live forever. We're going to colonize space. We took an idiotic gamer, made him wealthy, and now he's a foreign policy pundit. We can do anything. None of it good, but we can do it,
Was that last guy, are you referring to Elon Musk or just all of them?
Well, Elon Musk is colonizing. Peter Thiel's going to upload himself, at which point I'm going to hire a hacker to cut off his communications so he can't talk to us. And then Palmer Luckey, who does Anduril, is he created the Oculus virtual reality headset, and then he sold it. And Peter Thiel said, maybe you should make weapons. So now he does. He's 32. He's knee-deep in making weapons. He wears a Hawaiian shirt. He's got a soul patch. He's like a caricature of himself. And he thinks he should not just be making bank on this stuff, but he should also be directing our foreign policy, which, why wouldn't you have a gamer with the maturity of an 11-year-old running your foreign policy? That would be an improvement over Trump, right? But I think that maybe the biggest thing is the techno-optimism and also the grabbing of these symbols. Like the two of these companies are named after objects in Lord of the Rings. And Jill Lepore has a book coming out where she says a lot of their ideas for the military tech sector came from a science fiction story from 100 years ago. So we need to write a bunch of science fiction stories where our side wins. And then they'll read it and they go, oh, I see. I'm going to put down my sword and my computer and my algorithms, and I'm going to play nice now because it was in a science fiction book,
Yeah, I've seen a decent amount of science fiction, but the lesson is never, you should pursue this in real life. They need to have Lord of the Rings : an anti-war epic about war.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start like the Hobbit group, and we'll be like a peace consulting organization.
I love that. And then that means we get 2 breakfasts, right? Or 2 dinners?
Yeah, and also it'll be a buddy movie where we just do all these weird things, which is essentially the same as walking around New York. So, I'll have a lot to work with.
I'm so down. To go back to the book for a sec. So The New Frontier of the Tech Bros. The book talks about how Dwight D. Eisenhower's warning came true. The epigraph is this world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hope of its children, which Eisenhower said in his Cross of Iron speech in 1953. What did he get right? And what could he just not have seen coming? Like, how much is our reality worse than he ever possibly could have imagined?
Well, if Eisenhower only did those 2 speeches, we'd be in great shape. First one is we're blowing all this money on the military. And the second one was beware the military-industrial complex. But in between, he did build the nuclear triad, the missiles on land and sea and bombers. He did threaten to nuke the planet as opposed to sending a bunch of boots on the ground. He did sponsor coups in Guatemala and Iran. He did sort of tinker with the beginnings of the Vietnam War. He pulled out of Suez. He pulled out of Korea because he was cheap. So he preferred coups and threatening to annihilate people to big armies. So he wasn't a peace thing, but he was insightful. And of course, the fact that the general who won World War II, a white guy, even the Trump people would have respected him maybe, took all this flack from the military for being soft on defense was more than he could bear, But I think what he didn't realize, the speech is pretty foresightful because he says it's not just about them, sucking up our budget. It affects every city, every state house. He says it has even a spiritual effect, which I don't quite get that, but he said that. And he also said, beware the scientific technological elite. There's no quick technological fix, which just seems very pertinent to exactly what the Silicon Valley crew is saying. So he had all of that, but he also said, because of the nuclear age, we actually do need a large arms establishment because you don't have time to build up from zero. And so we're stuck with this thing, but let's at least control it. And we need an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. I don't think he could have imagined how hard it is to muster an alert and knowledgeable citizenry in the age of conspiracy theories, QAnon, infotainment, people who know stuff and don't think they can change anything anyway. Just this bombardment of infotainment that we have. So there's that. And of course, Lockheed Martin is larger than any company that Eisenhower could have dreamed of, because it was in the 90s after the Cold War, there was this big merger boom subsidized by those great liberals, Bill Clinton and Al Gore. And Lockheed Martin was 22 different companies. The two big ones were Martin Marietta and Lockheed. And the head of Martin Marietta, a guy named Norm Augustine, became head of the merged company. But according to his contract, that meant he was leaving Martin Marietta. So he got a $9 million golden parachute, essentially for being promoted. And $3 million of that was paid for by the U.S. government. So I wrote a thing in the Washington Post about that. And well, at first I interviewed him. I said he was a forward-looking philosopher king of the defense industry. He seemed to have his pulse on the future of the world. I desperately needed to interview him. And then I wrote an article about how he was like stealing our tax money. And his PR guy, this guy named Chip, said, "Bill, Norm was so disappointed in you." I'm like, "Chip, you're the PR guy. Do you know how to use the internet? Have you seen the stuff I've written? Why were you surprised?" But anyway, then the Lockheed Martin called the editor at the Post, a guy named Jefferson Morley, who had also been at The Nation, and now is big on explaining the Kennedy assassination, which is a lifetime's work, of course. But anyway, they somehow had arguments that they wanted to make against the article, and he said, "Okay, so incorporate their arguments in your article and then refute them," which I did. And then they took out a full-page ad about themselves in the same issue as my op-ed, when they used to have a separate op-ed section at the Post. So I was deeply honored, And then I got invited. They're doing a obituary for Norm Augustine, who's now 88. And I got invited to weigh in. And I didn't want to be the guy who said something mean about somebody in their obituary. So I said, well, it's a corrupt system, and he was a master at using it on behalf of his company. And I gave a few examples, because he worked with the Boy Scouts and the Red Cross, and he was a good corporate citizen. He's big on STEM education. He taught engineering at Princeton for fun. He had a book called Augustine's Rules of Defense, which was sort of funny. Like he said, in 2050, we're only going to be able to afford one fighter plane, and each service will get to use it 2 days a week. So, for a defense executive, kind of funny. Also a harder adversary, because he wasn't innately evil in every respect. And I still will meet people who say, "Yeah, you said bad things about Norm Augustine, man." But some people say that about Musk too. The Musk acolytes are like, "What do you mean he's a racist and an anti-Semite? I don't see that. Where are you getting that, Bill?"
Is that still the case, that the villains are able to cloak themselves in?
Well, there's the people who want to colonize space view him as a hero. And every time I tell them anything bad about him, they're like, "Don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me." They cover their ears, The other thing, though, with Eisenhower is, I think in his day, there was toxic ideology. I mean, there was McCarthyism, there was the John Birch Society. He decided to let them hang themselves with their own rope. He didn't support them. He didn't crush them. But now I would say that kind of ideology is even more ascendant. It's like the John Birch Society got to pick the president or something. Not that Trump would know what it is, because he would have had to read something. So Eisenhower would be the ultimate moderate. In fact, Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's has a network of anti-war vets who write, do media stuff called the Eisenhower Media Network. And there's a guy, Larry Wilkerson, who used to work with Colin Powell, but who's quite radical now. And he thinks of himself as an Eisenhower Republican, which of course wouldn't be. He'd be a rhino Republican in name only. He'd get kicked out, and they'd say that he was soft on defense, and then they'd elect a draft dodger or something, which has happened,
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen Eisenhower Media Network stuff. I didn't know there was a ice cream collab.
It's the ice cream industrial complex.
Yeah.
which is actually ice cream cone costs about the same as an M1 tank now.
Right. Yeah. So to what extent has this latest war, not war, disproven the theory that you can throw infinite amount of money at a problem and everything will come out okay?
Well, I think, to me, this is, well, cover your ears, folks, but America is a declining empire. And you heard it here first, or if you went to a university. And these guys are actually accelerating that decline because they're so ham-handed. A lot of these institutions they're destroying were designed to both do some good, but also cement U.S. influence. All the international institutions, international financial bodies, NATO to some degree, parts of the UN, Agency for International Development. I mean, AID helped get people clean water and feed them and fight disease, but they also used AID to hide CIA operatives in the Central American wars, or clean up after Iraq, or give unconscionable amounts of money to Bechtel to screw things up when they were supposed to be building schools and showers that were electrocuting our troops. So they all had a mixed bag. But the Trump people didn't see that part of that was influence, and they've pretty much destroyed most of that. So now they're down to the military. And if you take a cold hard look, the U.S. has not, quote, won a war in living memory. Even in 91, when they kicked Saddam out of Iraq, as Andy Bacevich pointed out, that just was the trigger for a generations-long war with the sanctions and then the Bush invasion and so forth. And so Iran is like, well, Marx allegedly, like I read it, right, said, history is happens first as tragedy and then as farce. It's sort of like that, except so many people are undergoing so much pain. It's sort of a tragic farce. It's not really, you can't laugh about it. But, I mean, they didn't even come up with a rationale for this war. George W. Bush, Cheney bullied the intelligence community to come up with some fake assessments. And they came up with like handy phrases like, we don't want to wait for the smoking gun that could be a mushroom cloud, And so it ends up, the reason Saddam Hussein didn't tell him he didn't have nukes is because they thought he would kill him. And if he kept it in doubt, maybe they wouldn't. And this is what has happened. Gaddafi got rid of his nukes, killed. Saddam didn't have nukes, killed. Iran, they claim they have nukes, they don't, kill their leader. The only one who's left is Kim Jong-un. He has nukes. So really our policy is, if you don't want us to wipe you off the face of the earth, hurry up and get nukes. It's really a pro-proliferation policy. And when George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, so forth, well, North Korea is the last leg standing because they could do damage to us in Korea if we tried to literally, take out Kim Jong-un. So the whole thing is absurd. And of course, Trump said last year when he bombed Iran, he said, we've totally obliterated their nuclear program. And then one of his people pointed out they had, and they tried to fire him. And then this time when he went in, he said, oh, they could attack us. And implication being maybe with a nuclear weapon. So a young reporter cornered him on the tarmac when he was getting on the plane, said, well, last year you said we obliterated the program. And then this year you said it was a threat. So how did that happen? He said, well, maybe there's one buried down there in the rubble. Okay, if there was, it would be some clumsy-looking device that you would have to miniaturize, put on a missile. The missile would have to travel 6,000 miles to the United States. None of those things exist. So it's complete and utter bullshit. And the rationale was changing by the day. At one point he said the U.S. and Iran would jointly administer the Strait of Hormuz and split the money. And the same reporter said, how's that going to work? And he started doing a little dance. Me and the Ayatollah, we'll get together. like the guy is a clown, but he's also a war criminal and a fascist. I just can't handle all those things being in the same package.
Yeah, it's like pick two.
And also a stand-up comic. I mean, Trevor Noah said that's his methodology. Like the rally crowd, like if a joke doesn't work, you try something else. If a joke works, you double down. Like, oh, people like The Wall, we'll do The Wall. People like Space Force, Space Force. So, the Daily Show folks asked people after one of the rallies what the Space Force was. And of course they said, I don't know, but it sounds really cool.
Full circle back to TV influencing policy, policy influencing TV.
I mean, I come from MAGA country. I mean, it's MAGA country now. And my nieces try to keep me away from my sister-in-law because she's a Trumper. But we were talking. I said, well, why do you support Trump? She said, because he's a good businessman. I said, yeah, I'm The Apprentice. In the real world, he's hiding his numbers because he doesn't have as much money as you think. Well, somebody said if he had taken the money his dad handed to him, put him in a savings account, he may have more money now than he does. Of course, he's always stiffing his contractors and he's hiring undocumented workers. And at this point, the company mostly either sells its name. Why you would want to buy that name, I don't know. Or they're just raking in money from sovereign wealth funds like, yeah, put money in Don Jr.'s crypto fund, or thank you, Saudi Arabia, for giving $2 billion to Jared for his investment fund. Or, pour some, there's all this UAE and Saudi money going into Silicon Valley, as well as Israeli technology and money. So it's this toxic brew. It's not just our tax dollars. There's venture capital money, there's UAE money, there's Saudi money. And now they're trying to sort of merge the U.S. and Israeli defense industries so that there's not a big fat aid package we can go after every year. So it's like the $1 trillion is small because they're going for more for the Pentagon. They want 1.5. Also small because there's all these other rivers of money flowing in. And the tech funds are, if you're a VC fund, you put down money, you want that company to get a contract. So you're going to lobby like hell. So it's not just the manufacturers lobbying. Now it's the VC funds, it's the Saudis, it's the UAE, it's their lobbyists. And there's companies that like, well, actually, I've got this device that could monitor the rate of the melting of the polar ice caps. And the VC firm's like, nah, you could use that for targeting and surveillance. Why would you waste it on that? So it's just, it's the story of my life. Like people only want to talk to me when things are really, really bad about things I've been talking about forever and they didn't pay attention. And is it too late? I hope not. But it's very perverse to be only popular when the world is going to hell in a handbasket, which kind of segues into the comedy in a way.
Yes, tell us a bit more about that merger. So it sounds like between the American Israeli militaries. That sounds like it could be a conspiracy theory, but no, it's literally happening in the defense bill.
Yeah, well, Netanyahu's big on this, which is one reason you got to be suspicious, because he's noticed that Israel's not as popular as it used to be. There was never such a thing before Bernie Sanders as a resolution to stop an arms sale to Israel. We haven't won them yet, but he's bringing it up, and they're renegotiating a new 10-year aid commitment, and there's opposition to that, and so Netanyahu and the defense industry folks are like, yeah, well, military aid it's that big fat target every year, $3.8 billion or more that Congress can vote on. Let's do it differently. Let's develop weapons jointly, and we'll give Israel more money than that, but we'll call it military R&D. It'll be buried in the bowels of the Pentagon. People won't even know how much we're spending. And then we'll say, we're benefiting from Israel's wonderful military technology. What a great partnership. And it'll just be more opaque. It'll be harder for the public to know what's going on or to, have it make its voice heard. And there's an amendment. I think it's gone from 219 to 224 with the switch of houses. But anyway, I mean, there's ways to find out, but which made it through the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the policy bill for defense. And now there'll be a couple other chances to block it. If they do it, then we're going to have to bust open the Pentagon budget and say, what are you giving them money for? What is this R&D program? How are they using this thing? And if we both put money in, do we have the right to stop them from using it? I don't know. We'd have to build a whole new regulatory scheme to deal with it. But my noble co-author, Ben Freeman, who wrote the whole book and let me put my name on it, which I'm greatly appreciative of, and is a geriatric millennial. He's like 45, I think. He is taking the lead on a lot of the public work on this. And then one of our analysts, Steve Simon, has run a few papers about it. But it's hard because it sounds great. Oh, we're going to stop giving them aid. They're going to be standing on their own legs, except it's just going to come under a different name. It's going to be a Pentagon Research and Development contract, some of which will probably be classified. And there's already Israeli money funding drone research at U.S. universities and some of the big cybersecurity fund companies here that have access to all of our data. are run by ex-Israeli spies. So the integration is there. Israel trains U.S. police in urban warfare. So this would take it to that next level. And there is opposition. Ro Khanna is trying to block it. Thomas Massie, a renegade Republican who told AIPAC they could never come in his office again, was primaried. So he's going to be out of the Congress at the end of this year. But he's the co-sponsor with Khanna trying to block this thing. So we either have to win that, or the Pentagon is going to have to be forced to give us the information we need so that we're not joined at the hip with the Netanyahu regime forevermore. So it's a hard moment. But on the other hand, we've never had this level of criticism of Israel, the Israel-U.S. relationship. I hear there's even comics who talk about it. I don't really believe that. I mean, if there were, I would know them. I mean, there's you, I guess. I don't mean to neglect your work, which is hilarious and on point.
Thank you. But no, there are great ones. Yeah, it all depends on the algorithm. I want to give a shout out to Sammy Obed. He's consistently on it, and his editor does an amazing job doing all like the dancing bubbles and like flashy transitions with the caption. He knows how to get people in. Let's talk about your comedy journey. When did you say the arms industry isn't depressing enough? I should subject myself to stand-up comedy.
Well, I took a break from studying in the military because I was tired of raising money. I was at this mom and pop think tank where there was all this nepotism, like the woman's husband was the IT guy, but he didn't understand IT.
No.
The babysitter was the publications manager. Her cousin was the fundraiser. Her kids worked there in the summer. And yet she was for good things. It was a crazy thing. But anyway, at some point, I needed to raise $100,000 to get a $2,000 raise basically to support her family,
Wow.
And so my wife saw an ad in the New York Times for local public official needs policy analyst with economic background. I didn't have real economic background, but the place I worked was called the Council on Economic Priorities. So it seemed like I should, I really only knew about military companies because I studied them during the anti-apartheid movement, like who was, abiding the arms embargo. And then a guy named Gordon Adams, who's since transitioned, is now Abby Ross, hired me at this think tank, the Council on Economic Priorities, to write about economic conversion, not religious conversion, but we thought it was Carter. We thought the Pentagon budget was going to come down. How do communities find other ways to make a living than making weapons? Then Reagan came in and that all went by the boards, and I was studying, Star Wars and stuff. But anyway, so I got tired of that. I went to work for the New York State Attorney General as a speechwriter. And it was mostly domestic stuff, consumer, environmental. And he was a really great guy. He was a reformer. He was ethical. He hired all these lawyers from the nonprofit sector, but he had zero sense of humor. So every once in a while, I'd put a joke in the speech, and we would literally have to have a meeting to explain the joke. And in the meeting, they tried to make the joke easier to understand, and then it wouldn't be funny anymore. Like I had a joke. It was just an offhand remark. He was speaking to an Italian-American society, and I think like U.S. was about to play Italy in the World Cup and get our asses kicked. And I said, and he was going to say something like, well, maybe we should challenge you to a pickup baseball game. Like, it wasn't really funny. It was just an offhand thing. He's like, what does baseball have to do with soccer? Why are we saying this? And then somehow they wanted to put in something about the Jamaican bobsled team. It got way out of hand. And so I said, all right, no jokes. I'm not doing this anymore. And then I got a job at a think tank. I was leaving the Attorney General's office, and this guy, Bert, who was his community affairs guy who went out and talked about consumer stuff, bet me that I couldn't do a going away speech where everybody but my boss would laugh. And I did it. I killed it. People were laughing, and he was like, yeah, why are they laughing? But why are you even saying this? So I went to the new school, and the new think tank was called the World Policy Institute, because, of course, the 10 of us were going to change the world, and we're still working on it. Well, they went out of business. But anyway, the new school has free classes, and there was a stand-up comedy workshop. by a guy named Scott Blakeman, who's still around. He used to have a thing called Laughing Liberally. I'm to the left of liberal, so I couldn't really do that. And also he was terrible at promoting stuff. Like he would invite me to an event. I'd been 12 people and the audience would be 14, so he was funny, but he couldn't run his way out of a paper bag, But anyway, so I go to class and you're supposed to bring material the first night. And I had a bunch of jokes about Richard Nixon's sex life, which I found incredibly funny. And he said, no, Bill, it's better to do comedy about things you know about. And I had to, frankly, admit, I did not have personal experience of Richard Nixon's sex life, thankfully. He says, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I work at a foreign policy think tank, and my specialty is international arms control. And only at the New School would people say, God, would we love to hear a comedy routine about international arms control. And I was like, oh, damn it. What am I going to do, right? So I tried it. One of my things I did is I took the unclassified version of the Pentagon's nuclear posture statement. I would read it on stage because I thought it was funny, but I was apparently the only one. Then I had a imitation of a ballistic missile. I would put my hands on my side and go 2 inches off the ground. And I said, when I was younger and I could actually jump, the joke killed. But nuclear weapons jokes are kind of few and far between. But it was a little bit of my niche for a while. Although my first performance was about, weapon systems named after presidents. So like Jimmy Carter submarine. And I had this terrible joke, which you can cut it out if you want. It's really bad. But it was like, what would they name after Clinton? So I said it would be a howitzer. And if you rub the tip, the howitzer would get larger. That was my low point as a comic. But it was during Fleet Week, and there was all these sailors there. And Scott said, oh, God, Bill, sailors and foreign policy. I'm like, Scott, sailors are our foreign policy. It's going to be fine. So that's sort of how it started. But then it turned into this self-deprecating thing because I have a neighbor who's always like, well, Bill, you haven't bought world peace yet. And if you did, you wouldn't have a job, And so rather than slapping him, I play along. And but I was on a show with Robert Scheer, who wrote an amazing book back under Reagan called With Enough Shovels, because he met the civil defense guy who said, oh, yeah, if there's a nuclear war, as long as we have enough shovels to dig little holes, put doors over them, we're good. Well, Bob Scheer might be in his mid-80s, still got a podcast. So I'm on there a year or so ago, and he says, Bill, you've been doing this for 40 years, and it's only getting worse. And I'm paraphrasing, but we're all going to die, So I sent him a note. I said, Bob, I think you're a progressive. I think you're trying to mobilize people. This is not working. Take a beach vacation. So then my routine became, my one-person show is I get no respect. My life as a failed foreign policy pundit. And sadly, the line that always works is I work at a foreign policy think tank, and I'm supposed to be promoting world peace. If you've been paying attention at all, I've been fucking up royally and I should be fired for incompetence. So it kind of works because people like self-deprecating humor, even if they don't know what a Trident missile is But the problem is if I'm trying to get people encouraged, my act is about that I'm a failure, which is a joke because obviously one person's not going to solve all this. But the only thing I've done that helps is I try to leave time for a Q&A at the end, which can be serious or not. So then you can get into current politics and have a little fun,
Yeah, that's amazing. What kind of questions have you gotten?
Well, one was what was I most surprised by when I was writing the book, which was just how unhinged the Silicon Valley tech folks are. Like I was aware of them, but I was a Lockheed Martin guy. I had written a book about Lockheed Martin, which is the old school. And if I hadn't written this new book, I'd be irrelevant. It would be like being an expert on the Dutch East India Company. No more CNN interviews, But I really felt that their worldview was as or more dangerous than their technology because they think they're some sort of secular gods. They're going to live forever. They're going to colonize space on a mass scale. They're going to beat China. There's a book, Alex Karp, the head of Palantir, one of the big companies, wrote a book where he said, America's a bunch of slackers. Like Silicon Valley just makes phones and toys and people just watch reality TV. Patriotism is dead. The idea of the West is dead. And we have to fix that. We need a unifying national mission. And so lo and behold, his mission is a new Manhattan Project at the scale of what we did for the nuclear bomb to militarize AI. And then when we do that, we're going to have a lead on China forever because, of course, they don't have engineers or science. So how could they ever catch up, right? And I'm like, this guy is running a major corporation. This is the most naive, self-regarding bullshit I have ever read. And people are buying it. But they have bought it. I mean, in Vietnam, they were supposed to have a special system that would find every Viet Cong soldier in the jungle. Failed. Reagan's perfect Star War failed. We fought, in Iraq and Afghanistan, people with no air force, no anti-aircraft. We had precision-guided munitions, and they won with bombs they set off with their telephones because it was their country. They knew the terrain, they knew the culture. A lot of our troops weren't really sure why they had sent them there in the first place. Our morale was not good. So despite all that, these tech bros are saying, oh, yeah, with the right technology, we're golden. The era of American dominance will return. And by the way, do you have $1 trillion to spare? And while you make me rich, please worship me also. I mean, it's insane. So that question led to me doing my rant about the tech folks, which was not in the formal, routine. So
How do we fight back against these guys? I guess the fact that they fancy themselves gods by chipping away at their image, does that give
I think
any?
it's got to be, we have to crowdsource it. We're coming up on the summer of Lud, the festival of the Neo-Luddite resistance, which I only learned about, I don't know, 3 months ago. But essentially, it's kind of like the Yippies or Abby Hoffman, but they don't take drugs. And they think we should, talk to each other, get off our phones.
Whoa.
They believe humanity is more important than robots. They've got the wacky ideas, man. And they're going to have workshops on how to make your clothes last longer and digital security and the new counterculture. And the lead guy that I met was 22, and he's great. He came to one of my comedy things at Caveat, and I did a shout out. And the walls were shaking, but there was only 2 of them there. They were just loud, and they gave me a handmade sticker afterwards, which is I proudly keep under my pile of books. So I'm going to speak at a teach-in on the 30th at the New School, and that evening at 9 we're going to have an open mic at a place called Humorville in Williamsburg, which you're invited to come to. It could be a complete mess, but I'll send you the details. You would be the high point of any such event,
Thank you. No, that sounds amazing. The ideological and revolutionary impact of just simply logging off for a minute.
I mean, so that's sort of like the cultural front. But even if we figured that out and we model a better way of life, if you're fighting a fascist state, you also need power. You need ways to protect yourself. You need ways to protect election. There's all kinds of I think there's going to be all these different elements in play. And I think we just need to kind of push in the same direction without expecting each other to all agree about everything. Because if you have 23 demands and I only agree to 22 and you write me off, we're probably going to lose, and somebody like me, I'm kind of free floating because I'm 71. I don't really care anymore. and young people come to me because they think I'm going to know stuff. But when it comes to research, usually they know a lot more because they have different research methods. They know different people. And usually all I do is connect people or help them get published, or they educate me about different aspects of the problem that I can then speak about. So I have an easier job in a way. I'm kind of free floating. It's the organizing, the building some sort of network where you can make decisions and where somebody who has a crackpot idea and one follower doesn't have the same amount of power as somebody who runs an organization of 1 million people, which seems to be how it works now, So yeah, it's a huge challenge. But on the other hand, think about it. If your choice was hanging out with a bunch of fun people who want to make the world a better place, or working for a robot that was owned by, Palmer Luckey or Peter Thiel, which would you choose? But we have to create that choice because obviously they're chewing up all the jobs, they're sucking up all the money. And a lot of people who are not happy about this don't think they can change it. So they're not in the fight. But their idea is I'm going to stay home, take care of my family, my community. That option is gone because they're eroding our entire social safety net. They're changing the nature of warfare. They're surveilling us. They're undermining our democracy. So the sitting it out option is really not there. And it's much more energizing to fight the power than it is to bend the knee, especially if you're with people who know that we need to have some fun along the way. So I think we have some advantages, but we don't have $1 trillion. We don't have we don't have a democracy. We have a republic. We have the Electoral College. It was all tilted in favor of the slave states to get them to join. And of course, we got a lot to deal with, but I think it's doable. Like, I had a big argument with somebody about, well, the corporations own the media. And I'm like, well, there's democracy now, there's podcasts. It's just people need to know where to look. And she said, yeah, but they all use the internet and that profits corporations. And I'm like, well, we don't use a tin can with a string or
Yeah.
yell from my rooftop. What exactly? Or like on the the movie Network, like I'm tired as hell. I'm not going to take it. And like, what am I supposed to do? She says, pirate radio. I said, good, but I have to have a radio. I have to know that your station exists. Probably low wattage. I said I tried to make it sound very like lefty and authoritative. I said, we're probably going to have to use the master's tool to defeat the master. That's part of the dialectic. Because I figured if I said dialectic, that would clinch the deal. But she wasn't buying it. But it was fun. It's fun to even have a conversation like that, And there might be a way to create a system that's not corporate owned, but that would be the work of many years, I assume. And there's no question the system that is terrible because, they can grab our data, they can track us, they can. If we didn't need it, we wouldn't use it. But if we need to reach large numbers of people, I haven't figured out other ways at it. You could do like Occupy Wall Street, the human microphone.
Yeah,
Just put
mic check.
people 10 feet apart, spanning the globe, and you just say something. But then it could be like the game of telephone, where on the other side of the world it would say something different.
You mentioned coming up through the anti-apartheid movement. And as we wind down, I do want to mention that because that one objectively was a success, eh? Like apartheid South Africa fell and the Republic of South Africa lost to Canada in the World Cup. Like, what are the lessons we can learn from a thing that actually worked?
Well, one is patience, because I was in the anti-apartheid divestment movement at Columbia in the mid-'70s, and the students didn't get them to divest till 1985. And the first pickets about it were in 1964, Students for Democratic Society. So it was over like a 20-year period. But then after the divestment, the students were like the spark. Then it was the unions, the pension funds, cities, what they would purchase. And then in 86, the Congress passed comprehensive sanctions on South Africa over Ronald Reagan's veto. And there was a moderate senator from Indiana, Richard Lugar, who was the deciding vote on our side. Again, would not be allowed to be in the Republican Party anymore. And then in the early 90s, the South African government, Mandela rose to the presidency. And there was this guy, Dumisani Khumalo, I used to organize with. He worked for American Community in Africa. He was a South African exile. He was living on nonprofit wages in a basement apartment in Brooklyn. They made him the UN rep of a free South Africa. So the first party we went to at his house was a kind of fancy apartment on Park Avenue. So it was an amazing story. And he's since passed, but I was at the UN recently. And when you come in the visitors' entrance, there's a big statue of Mandela holding up his hands and smiling. And I talked to a couple guys from Botswana. I said, did you know who Dumisani Khumalo is? And, they're younger. They didn't. I told them. So, and they thought they liked the story. So I was hanging out in the coffee shop. It's what I do at the UN. You just wait and see if anybody interesting shows up. And the guys come by, Khumalo, walking by me, Khumalo, he gives me a fist bump. So I had this privilege of working with these amazing people who helped change history. But at the time, I was just like depressed, looking for something meaningful to do. So you never know how it's going to play out. I think the problem now is a matter of time because there's climate, there's nuclear weapons, there's these endless wars, there's the techno-fascists, there's the authoritarian tilt. So, usually organizing and building relationships is time-consuming, whereas destruction, as we've seen in Gaza and in this Iran war, happens quickly. So we're in a bit of a race against time. But on the other hand, I don't think they have a legitimate leg to stand on to justify this other than greed, division, narcissism. There's no positive case for what they're doing. It's just people are living off of old ideologies that are incredibly destructive. So we're on the right side. I think there is more movement than people realize because a lot of us are doing our own little things separately and sort of these little seeds of resistance. And so we have to bring that together. And I don't know nothing about how to run an organization. I mean, I would be a socialist, but I don't like going to meetings. So I
Yeah.
don't think you're allowed to be a socialist if you don't go to meetings. Maybe you are. I don't know. I could be a socialist sympathizer or something.
It's a
But
lot of meetings about when the next meeting is.
and
Meetings
also,
about
what do
meetings.
you mean by a socialist? Are you Vladimir Lenin? Are you Mamdani? Are you the head of Denmark? Like, there's a lot of gradations there. It's sometimes I just want to work with whoever's seems to be fighting the good fight and put aside labels. But you kind of are. You got to be branded in this society, kind of. If I had a podcast, I would call it "War is Stupid," anti-war podcast about war, because then it would be unmistakable what I was talking about. But
Thank you.
unfortunately, somebody did that already, so I can't do that.
Exactly. Yep. War is Stupid. I was surprised that it hadn't already been claimed on Instagram. I only just started that Instagram account last week.
I think there's something about like stating the obvious. People think they think it was already done,
right.
so you lucked out. Yeah.
And yeah, orlimatlow.com was available also. Nobody went for that one.
This is so fun, and I mean, between the podcast and the comedy, you're living my dream life.
My gosh. Wow. Oh, thank you. That is so sweet to hear. It's been amazing hearing from you because I'm at the beginning of this journey. I only got, quote, I don't want to say radicalized because then they'll use it against me, but I only felt the need as I came to this work as a stand-up comedian, as like I have an inability to shut up. So I might as well not shut up about things that matter. So it means the world to me to get to talk to and learn and party with someone who's been doing this work for 40 years.
See, the thing is, you're going to have to do all the hard work.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be reincarnated as some thing of frozen peas or something, and you're still going to have to fight the good fight. But also, I think it's not so much radicalized. You came to your senses.
Thank you. Yes.
You looked around and you said, this isn't how it should be.
Yeah.
So to me, what's radical should be mainstream. I mean, it should be the majority opinion. That's the goal,
Exactly. I try to make a point to say, like, if anything, the radical thing is being indifferent to human suffering. Like, what should be perceived as radical is enabling death and destruction. Like being against that.
They would call me naive for saying we should get rid of nuclear weapons. Their idea is let's just keep building them forever and hope they never get used again. That's naive.
Yeah. Incredible. I think that'll be the name of the episode.
And then there's cynicism is like the laziest position ever because people adopt it so they seem like they're sophisticated, but they're really adopting it because they've thrown their hands up and said, I give up. I mean, anybody can be cynical. I mean, and Frank, if you just took a cold, hard look at the world and said it's hopeless, you could make a case. But the point is we're going to fight that. And people have done remarkable things before. I mean, there's some weird people out there. I have my doubts sometimes, but I do believe we could turn this thing around. And even if we don't, you would rather go down fighting with a bunch of fun people than just bending the knee on day one, like all these powerful people in the media and the universities, which is both shameful and embarrassing that they folded so quickly.
And they're already backtracking, or at least like now people who were fired for being insufficiently mournful of Charlie Kirk are getting big payouts.
Well, I live in the shadow of Fortress Columbia, where they're protecting the students from free speech because it might hurt their feelings. But there's an uptown campus that's mostly business and tech, and of course all the business is green because it sounds better. But I'm waiting for some stuff to happen up there because it's not built like a fortress. It's wide open. Like a banner, reflect a movie. I shouldn't be telling you this. This should be secret, but I'm just saying.
And they're getting a new congresswoman. Like that's a very obvious way of their cramp down on free speech. A failure to protect Mahmoud Khalil quite literally led to Daria Liza Avia Chevalier running.
There's a new Palestinian restaurant 10 blocks below campus called Heinz Hall after a victim of Israeli violence.
Yes.
And the menu says end the occupation on the side. And you still can't go on campus, the main campus, without an ID. But they've started a program where you can apply kind of the equivalent like a visa. Like if you behave yourself, community member, you can come on campus as long as you genuflect when you see a security guard. And so I haven't gotten mine yet, but my idea was going to be to bring takeout menus from the Palestinian restaurant, which I hope also say end the occupation, and just spread them around. And if they accuse me of propagandizing, students got to eat, man. I'm just handing out menus. But I think the crackdown has actually electrified and the pro-Palestinian, pro-justice culture. You can't do it inside that little 6 blocks, but around it, including the progressive churches, the restaurant, the Palestinian students. When Hillary Clinton said, "Oh, these kids, they don't know about the Middle East." Well, hello, they're from the Middle East. They've seen the pictures. You supported the wars in Libya and Iraq, which have ruined the Middle East. Perhaps it's time for you to shut up.
Hell yeah.
Go into the
Exactly.
Situation Room and shutter down the hatches and just talk to yourself. And then come back and write a memoir 150 years from now that nobody reads. And that would be my goal for you.
And thank you. And so as we wind down, where can people find your work? Where can people get the book and see your solo show? If there are any
Well,
dates coming up?
well, we're doing this series of comedy cabarets at Caveat, and we have to set up the next one. And I want to do these things called festivals of resistance and joy, which are going to be people from different movements performing comedy stories. I'm going to interview people about how they got into the movement and have them tell us something that's not political, something interesting they do. Ideally, people can sell books and art, a lot of time to hang out. So I'm working on a venue for that. And I would like those to be regular, like the cabaret every couple months, the festival every 2 or 3 months, the progressive happy hour every couple months. Just we need a cultural grounding because it's hard times and we got to stick together. And that even the little happy hour, I mean, that's how I met you. So I even just through that, I've met people, progressive artists. I met you. If I was just going to the usual think tank meetings, I would be talking like this, and I would be using the right Washington rhetoric, and I would be an utter and complete failure. But they would talk to me, So this is better. But generally, when you Google me, my name's different enough that if you go to Tom Dispatch, I've got 15 years of stuff there, and a lot of my longer stuff is on the website of the Quincy Institute. But I have a Forbes column. It's like I'm like you. I can't shut up. I have a Substack called Disarming Humorist. So there's more of me than you could ever want or need. And I don't recommend reading all of it because it's not really, there's probably better uses of your time.
There are some really excellent ones. And this book really just sums up 50 episodes of the podcast in one book. So I can't recommend it enough.
And Ben gets all due credit. He didn't write the whole thing, but he's a lot more level-headed than I am. So when my head exploded, he would make it intelligible to somebody who didn't already agree with me. And that was huge,
Yeah, it's very well done. And I'm excited for the Festival of Resistance. Thank you. Going down with the fight in the company of cool people is really all we can ask for these days.
And we might win, and that would be fun too.
Yes, right. Thank you.
And also,
it's been won before.
We have to take credit for small victories. I mean, if you do something that helps a family, a community, that counts, even if we haven't changed the system yet. And we need to cherish those and the people who take the risk to make that stuff happen,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it might not be as glamorous as being a tech CEO named after a Lord of the Rings.
But it's like saying, the system sucks, the world is rigged, and everybody's a greedy pig is not a sufficient platform for change. It's good for like going to the bar and hanging out with your friends, but it's not a strategy.
Nor is it a punchline. It's funny. Throughout the course of the conversation, what's true of foreign policy is true of comedy. Like sarcasm is the weakest form of comedy. So cynicism is the weakest ideology. Everyone, whether they're a comedian or in a think tank, like, don't be afraid to put forth some effort.
Well, the great thing about you is you have a positive vibe.
That's so funny. Thank you.
Like you're excited about what you're saying, and you're saying real stuff, and it's funny, and that's perfect. I'm a little low key. Like I don't need to jump up and down to when I'm on stage. It would be weird.
Yeah.
But if I do, it catches people off guard. Like I was back when Jeb Bush was running, his thing was
clap.
Jeb with an exclamation point because he was ashamed of the name Bush or something. So I'd be talking at my low key thing and they could barely hear me. And they say, the thing I love about Jeb Bush is he's got that great slogan, Jeb, with an exclamation point. And so because I don't normally do that, they're like, wow. And then I said, and then he started losing and he changed his slogan to Jeb. And then he got his ass kicked up and down by Trump. And it was just the letters for Jeb crumbling like a Roman ruin. But because I'm so low key, if I punctuate it with like an F-bomb here or a little thing there or a gesture, it has a bigger effect. Then I'm not going to like stalk up and down the stage like Chris Rock and look people in the eye and jump. It would be preposterous,
But yeah,
So-
a well-placed, taking people by surprise. So thank you so much, Bill.
Yes. Well, my nieces are in their 50s and they saw me and I won a comedy competition and they had a good time. They said, Uncle Bill, we didn't know you swore so much. And I'm like, well, it was appropriate to the moment. It was in the flow. I wasn't doing it just to drop F-bombs, But it was like funny because they're 55, but I'm also their uncle and I knew when they were growing up. So it's this funny back and forth, And they probably rigged it to let me win because they knew my nieces were there, And of course, what you win is one performance where you don't have to bring anybody. So you're working for free instead of giving them a couple $100. This is the big prize,
Exactly. We love a pyramid scheme, whether it's the military-industrial complex or Manhattan stand-up comedy.
So needless to say, doing this is a lot more fun than a bringer,
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm excited for the cabaret. Consider the people brought. Thank you for listening and or watching War is Stupid, an anti-war podcast about war. Please subscribe, rate and review, tell your dads. We'll see you next time.